looking at contemporary issues in Hashkafa, and what I want to deal with tonight is the concept of freedom of religion. Now, there are a few reasons that I feel this topic is important. It has many, many different consequences. I guess we could start with a simple question. Do you think the Torah believes in freedom and the value of freedom of religion? What do you think? In the Torah state, right, like the United States of America has a value of freedom of religion. Someone says, hey, my religion says such and such, they're patur from this, right? Jews drank wine during the Prohibition, freedom of religion, right? So freedom of religion. So the point is that do you think that the Torah believes in freedom of religion? Because a person basically say, hey, freedom of religion, what do you think?
Are you talking about for anyone or for someone who's born Jewish?
We can talk for anyone or someone born Jewish, but what under the Noahide laws?
There's a mix on that.
Yeah.
And some things say yes, and some things say no.
No, I think that they're.
They have the Shevet in Noah, so there are accepting other religions that acknowledge.
Is the Shevet B'nai Noach really allowance?
On the other hand,
are the Shevet B'nai Noach really an allowance to accept any other religion?
How do you define religion?
Well, that's true, but then I would say no in the case where, well, if we're talking about Torah or into Tanakh when we're actually killing off people, idol worshippers, then we're not accepting them, and it's not acceptable even
right.
if you're not
Okay.
Jewish.
So
there's a kind of a yes
yeah.
no
I mean, it looks from Tanakh that we're not too accepted for sure against Jews, right? Right? Everyone talks about Hanukkah as a great religion for the battle of freedom of religion. How did the Hanukkah battle start? How did the Hanukkah war start? You guys remember?
They're trying to be at that seat.
But what is the famous story that started the battle? Matisyahu killed a guy who was bowing down to an idol, right? They weren't fighting for freedom of religion, right? Okay. The fact is that they're not too. We're not too accommodating freedom of religion in certain ways. I mean, like, Kosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to make sure Egypt knows who's God, right? He says, know who's God. And he made a few little points to get across to the Egyptian about who's in charge, right? But the truth is that it gets into the issue. What is a Jewish obligation towards non-Jews and so forth and so forth? But for sure, in a Jewish country, right? Right? Even a non-Jew cannot practice idolatry, right? You could be a ger toshav. A ger toshav is like a resident alien, right? But you have to accept at least not to vote as Zorah. Most people say you have to accept the Shevet B'nai Noach. But the fact is that there's clearly, it would seem on the surface that we're not a big fans of freedom of religion, right? Now,
but is that if we truly didn't believe in freedom of religion, wouldn't we be a religion that focused on proselytizing constantly? Because we would feel our mission was to ensure that everybody was following this one way, and yet we are fairly insular.
Quite opposite that.
Well, it's an interesting perception because the children of Israel, who is the first forefather of the Jewish people? Abraham. And what was Abraham's real call to fame? What was the thing that separated Abraham from everyone else? He was a monotheist. He was the first monotheist. He was not the first monotheist. It's clear there were other monotheists at the time of Abraham Avinu.
He went down and spoke about it.
The fact of the matter is that so some people try to say Abraham was the first to discover God. Shem, Shem Be'aver, and Malchut said they sort of knew about. They already had a Kabbalah about the one God, right? They followed it, whatever, right? There was Shiva Shem Be'aver. There were some people learning there who believed in one God, right? Right? Like Malchut said, it was Kohen Lekel Elyon. That's one God. There were other monotheists, right? Avram, so he found God, but that was not what distinguished Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was a missionary. He's a proselytizer.
External to the text, more in terms of
there's drushes, but it's fact him finding God is also. The truth of the matter is the way we look at Avram Avinu. If you literally look at the text, what really distinguished Avram Avinu? There's very little in the text that distinguishes him until the end.
Distinguishes him
from anyone else. What makes Avram Avinu special? It's very hard in the text to really find what makes Avram Avinu special. Okay.
He introduced the world to God.
Yeah, but that's not in the text. You're right. People say that was his people. The fact of the matter is, until you get to the Akedah was pretty unique. But then a lot of people point out that they were going around, child sacrifices was said. So what exactly is unique about Avram Avinu? The point is that really in the text it's hard to really distinguish it. The truth is that I make this point many times. We are not a Bible-based religion. Okay, if you think that Judaism is a Bible-based religion, you are wrong. We are a Torah Sheba'al Peh based religion. Okay, and the best way of understanding it is really from this concept of Shem Shofar Hirsch. It's if you try to say, well, Torah Sheba'al Peh is a commentary on the text. A lot of things in Torah Sheba'al Peh don't seem to come from the text. So it seems to be some kind of manipulation, reading into the text, something of that nature. But the fact is if you really look at understanding from Shem Shofar Hirsch, it's a Torah Sheba'al Peh was a lecture, and Kodesh Baruch Hu told Moshe to write down some crib notes. And the notes were written in a certain way that were certain points, but written in a way that was a little bit like when you write down notes, you try and get someone else's notes of a lecture. You can't figure out what the lecture is about anyways unless you get some notes. Okay, but the fact is that you have problems with the text. But really, the fact is, what really distinguished Avram Avinu was the fact that he was out there fighting for people. Again, in the text you have the case of Stom, which is the other story that really distinguishes him. But the fact is, he was fighting for some other people. The fact is, your question on proselytization is an interesting question. The question is, what is the Jewish obligation to the world? So we talk about being Meir L'Goyim, to be the light unto nations, so forth and so forth. It seems that we don't do it. There's people seem to imply that. The fact is that there's an article by Rabbi Michael Broyd that talks about the Jewish obligation to spread the Noahide laws. Okay, and he argues that it's clear-cut in the Rambam. The Rambam believes that there's a Jewish obligation to get non-Jews to follow the Noahide laws. The Rambam in Hilchos Malachim says basically, Kaifin Kol Ba'i Olam, you force everyone in the world to follow Shav Mitzvah Bnei Noach. My Rabbi, what?
Force?
Yes, the Rambam says we're forced.
What does that mean, let's say, in this society where we're not the ruler,
Well, the fact is what does the Rambam mean by force? But he says, what does force mean? That's a good question. The point is that my Rabbi tells me that a lot of people understand the Rambam only meaning in Eretz Yisrael, but the language of the Rambam, I think he said the Gra understood the Rambam only meaning in Eretz Yisrael. And clearly in Eretz Yisrael we had to maintain a monotheistic nation, monotheistic country. But the question is, was that really by force? It's an interesting question what the Rambam means by that. But Rabbi Broyd argues that the other Rishonim don't say that. According to the other Rishonim, there doesn't seem to be an obligation on Jews to actually spread the Noahide laws. But there is a perception of the non-Jews being a Meir L'Goyim and spreading out the truth of God. The fact is that we have a certain concept of proselytization. It really is tied to this, because the idea, if I tell you we're allowed to do this by force, Rambam's statement that you're supposed to force, really it's like fingernails on the chalkboard to us, because we know what it's like to be on the other side. So already we're not comfortable with that. And that.
How do you force a belief? Like.
So this, in this case, the Rambam is talking about forcing the observance of the Noachide laws.
So one of the Noachide laws is not to worship idols.
Right. So
all you have to do is not worship idols.
It's an interesting. There's an interesting question like that. Is the observance of atheism, is an atheism in violation of the 7 Noachide laws? So what? Okay. So the Rav Yeshua Soloveitchik writes, he doesn't believe there's such a thing as atheism, because his concept is, I heard someone else just say this also, actually I think my wife just told me, she read him something of the Rav's definition. He says that it's really not shaykh to be atheism, because what is idolatry? Idolatry is placing any other value as absolute. The only absolute being is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Anything you express as absolute, that makes it idolatry, and therefore he's talking about values, which raises an interesting perspective if you look at the Jewish perception of values. There's no value in Judaism that is always trumps every other value. I must say, like Judaism, if you guys know the game Stratego, if you ever played the game Stratego, it has it's a military type game, and the marshal defeats the general defeats the colonel, and they all go down, and the lowest guy on the board is the spy, right? Okay, everyone can get the spy, except the spy is the only person that if he attacks first, he can get the marshal, which is a circle. So the truth is, if you look at values in Torah, you'll see that there's no one value that always trumps another value. Okay, it's like I say, it's almost like the prioritization of Torah is almost like Stratego. It's like you come up with concepts that this is always this. But in this situation, this trumps it. The only thing that trumps it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Rav says that if you take any value and make it absolute, that's idolatry. So he believes that no one's an atheist. So you take people like communists. No, they have another value that becomes the absolute value. Therefore, that's another idolatry. Okay. However, so he doesn't believe this, therefore he believes that it's not shaykh to be an atheist. Rabbi Price actually makes a statement that atheism doesn't seem to be in violation of the Noachide laws, because the Noachide laws is not to practice idolatry. If you don't practice idolatry, but don't necessarily believe in God, you're not in violation of the Noachide laws. Okay? Right?
And
so,
yeah. Just again, help. The definition of idolatry is
according to the Rav, idolatry is placing a...
What is the standard definition of idolatry?
Is giving the standard definition is assigning a force to something else besides the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Saying something, actually, it gets a little bit more technical. I would say it is assigning an independent force to someone else, to something else besides the Kodesh Baruch Hu.
So do we say that Islam and Christianity are or are not idolatry?
Okay, so the fact is that gets into very technical questions. Islam seems not to be idolatry. They don't assign an independent force to Muhammad. They just say Muhammad is the greatest prophet. But all the power of Muhammad comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In Christianity, you have a little bit more of an interesting question. First of all, you have a question from the devil. Okay, like if you compare it to Zoroastrianism, once Zoroastrianism says there's two forces, there's the good God and the bad God. So there's two independent forces. That's right. So the truth is, if you perceive the devil as being an independent force, then it already is idolatry. But the classic viewpoint is, how do you look at the Trinity? If you consider the Trinity to be three independent forces, then you basically don't have monotheism, and without monotheism, that's a form of idolatry, because you believe there's independent forces that aside from the one God. Okay, that's where you get into issues with Malachim. Malachim have forces, but what kind of forces do Malachim have independent of God? So the question is, they don't have any forces independent of God. There is one being that does have independent force from Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's understandable, and that's the human being, because the human being was given Bechira. So the human being has an independent will from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, so he can actually act contrary to Kodesh Baruch Hu. But that yields a tremendous amount of issues in Hashkafa. Okay, so if you read like Moshe Chaim Lutzaf's Das Tfunot, he deals with it, and the fact that Bechira raises this issue But on the other hand, there's a concept of Yud Kei Vav Kei, of Kodesh Baruch Hu being the one God in control of everything. So how do you balance Bechira with the fact that God is the one God in control of everything? And he basically says it's a contradiction. You have to live with the contradiction. Okay, it leads to a tremendous amount of issues. But the point is that. What I think the Rav is trying to point out is if you give any value, absolute value, right? Like you say, let's say like peace, right? You say pacifism is an absolute value, or it's always wrong to kill. It's very anti in certain ways. It's very non-Kantian in a certain way. Say it's always wrong to kill. Right? It'll be wrong to kill a person who's a murderer. It's wrong to kill Hitler. It's always wrong to kill. There's a value of life. It's always priority. That it would seem, according to Rabbi, would be a form of idolatry because you place this value. The only value that exists is the value of a Kodesh Baruch Hu.
Okay. The Kodesh Baruch Hu tells you to do something.
Yeah.
Let's say Shabbos. Let's take Shabbos.
Yeah.
If you always have to do this, is that an idolatry?
But the fact is, you're not doing it because of Shabbos. You're doing it because God told you to do it, and that's what makes it distinct. And that's what's interesting about Shabbos, because Shabbos is not always, so again, go sort of full circle. Shabbos is never always bright. There's the Kados Nefashos that overrides Shabbos. So you have interesting perceptions of that regard. Murder is mutter if it's sakanos, if it's not sakanos, if you have a rodef. Thank you. If you have a rodef, then murder becomes acceptable.
And war,
right?
Where it's
Mechal mitzvah, mechal rishus even. Right. So the fact is that you're getting into interesting issues. The question when you get into Christianity is how you understand the Trinity, and there's a whole question whether Shituf, which is a different. What the issue with Shituf is that you sort of attach forces in tandem with the one God. Not that they're independent of the one God, but they're sort of like God, but they're sort of subservient to God, but they're somehow connected to God. Then that Shituf might be permitted for non-Jews. It's a classic Ramah, there's problems with the Ramah and so forth and so forth. But the fact is that it really leads to certain issues. How you understand God, if you split them up, it's against the oneness of God. You get into real issues of what really is idolatry and so forth. I know that it becomes really difficult. Again, because there are people who would argue today that there's no idolatry in the world today. That even Hinduism is not idolatry. Okay, even though they think they have all these little gods, because there's one God that is in charge, and everyone else is sort of like secondary gods, and that's like Shituf, or that's like the angels, or whatever. So it gets a little bit difficult. That's where you get into the Meiri, where the Meiri seems to connect idolatry to barbarism. Basically argues that any nation that really is built upon a moral, legal system tied to some religious beliefs must have a monotheistic base, because idolatry yields barbarism. Okay, but anyways, our question here is that with freedom of religion, could we accept idolatry? It's clear from Tanakh they weren't too accepting of idolatry, especially among Jews, but they weren't too accepting of non-Jews practicing idolatry in the Jewish world. And then you get into an issue where Judaism accept idolatry by anyone else. But it's clear, according to Jewish law, it would be contrary to practice idolatry by non-Jews. The question is, do we enforce it? So the Rambam would say yes, whatever the Rambam means by kofin, that you do force. Other Rishonim says we have no obligation to impose this upon anyone else.
And moreover, if someone wants to become Jewish, isn't there a process of turning
it's a very interesting thing about that. I was once speaking in Rhode Island, in Providence, Rhode Island, and I remember at the end of lunch, I sort of said to some people, I said, listen, you guys are asking a lot of questions. I'll have a question and answer thing after lunch. Because once you get me talking, I like talking. So I'm the kind of speaker that, hey, what do you mean it's over now? I could talk some more. So anyways, I told them all after lunch, I would have a question and answer. So I remember it was in this shul, and I was up at the bima, and there was an elderly gentleman in the back gets up there and says, "Rabbi, I have to ask you a question. Exactly where you were standing 20 years ago, we had a Protestant minister speak to the congregation." Okay, I found that interesting. I found out that the shul originally was a conservative synagogue and then became frum with the mechitza. But obviously when it was conservative, they had this Protestant minister, but this guy was from back then. Anyways, gets up there and says, "I had a Protestant minister get up there and speak." He says, "What's wrong with you Jews? How come you're so selfish? If you got the truth, why don't you want to share it with anyone else?" And we always think we don't proselytize. Oh wow, we're great. Everyone. And he basically says, "What do you mean you don't proselytize? What are you, selfish people? What, you got the truth? You're not willing to share it? It's only for you guys?" And basically, the guy says, "Okay." The minister turned me all around. I think it was a great thing not to proselytize, and all of a sudden I hear that. It's selfish and it's not right and so forth and so forth. We all think in terms of proselytization because we know what it was to be subject to the Inquisition. So for sure we don't like imposition and persecution. The fact is we also don't like being jumped on by proselytizers because we're in the minority, and and someone comes to your door and wants to start up with you, you're not going to sit there and say. I once had a Rosh Yeshiva who did this. He said I had a Rosh Yeshiva who, Shel Che told his story. He was once on the street in New York, right? And he said Shel Che is like the rationalist. I mean, like he is Mr. Rationalist. There's a Rambam, and then that's it. And this is in philosophy. I mean, like he's in Hashkafis, rationalist. Anyway, so he's sitting there. He's walking down the street, and at the corner, he was watching this guy, on his soapbox, right? You're gonna, you're gonna die. You're gonna burn. You're not gonna be saved. And he saw this crowd developing around this guy. He said to him. He was looking and says, what attracts people to stop and see this? So he was watching. He said the crowd kept getting bigger, and this guy said, "You're dead." So he says he figured it out. He says you come across like you're sure. And so he went on the other corner, and he said, "You believe in a false Messiah. You believe in a false God," and once he started up like that with the same tone, he said the crowd completely dissipated because once he got so one guy could do it, like, two guys doing it, everyone thinks they're both crazy, and they just walk away. But he said he saw them all dissipate immediately. But the truth of the matter is how someone comes to your door and says he wants to spread the good word, you're not going to say, "Listen, man, I'd like to spread the good word to you." So the fact is we're in a certain defensive situation. So we recognize that. But the truth is we're not real fans of proselytizing anyways. We don't go to anyone. But the fact is that honestly, if a person really believes that he has something good, why do we do that? We do it with kiruv, and somehow we're doing it with kiruv. So what's wrong with going to non-Jews? If Shabbos is such a good thing, why can't non-Jews enjoy Shabbos? If it's so,
It would be the Shabbos coin.
See, self-serving, selfish.
Okay, kashrut then. You don't need anybody to be a kashrut.
But it's interesting when you get to it. If you argue Jewish nationalism, and one of the reasons, and there's arguments. I'm not the only one who says this. I've heard other people say this as well. There's a lot of arguments that the mitzvot that are sometimes the more popular ones are the ones that really stress Jewish nationalism, because Jews want to be unique. So it's like if you tell a person it's good to be honest. Anyone can be honest. Even the goyim can be honest. I don't care. That doesn't stand me up. But you tell them keep kosher. Oh yeah, sure. I want to keep kosher. But I want to stand out as a Jew. So it's interest nationalism. But the fact is that if you're giving arguments that Shabbos is such a good spiritual event, and you're recognizing the one God who created the world, why isn't Shabbos applicable to non-Jews? Why aren't you pushing it?
Isn't there some concept you're not allowed to teach Torah to non-Jews?
Yes,
That would go even more emphasized.
Yeah, however, the concept is that's an old issue in itself. The point is that it's not applicable to Shem Mrs. Beit Noach. It's a whole bunch of issues. It's not so simple. It's a whole different shir. If you want to read something about it, in one of Rabbi Blythe's books, he has a whole chapter on it. Teaching Torah to non-Jews. The question is, what can you teach on? Because there's a Gemara that's a stira. One Gemara says you can't teach non-Jews Torah. There's another Gemara that says a non-Jew teaches Torah is like a Kohen Gadol. So how do you work it out? Anyway, it's not so simple. Okay. The point is why aren't we going to tell people, hey, this is a good thing, share it with other people, right? It's a good thing to do. So it's not so simple. Even the idea of gerus, we turn away gerim, but the point is that I don't think it's to mean, hey, it's okay, you don't have to be a Jew. Go back and go sacrifice your children to Moloch. It's all right because you're a non-Jew anyways. I don't think that's what it means. I think it means that, listen, you want to follow the 7 Noahide laws? Fine, you don't have to become a Jew. At that point in time, once you're already following the 7 Noahide laws, you want to become a Jew. Then we say, listen, we have a test to make sure that you're going to be a good Jew. We don't want to let anyone who wants to become a Jew say, hey, I do it, and then not keep the standards. Right? All Jews have to keep the standards. We're stuck. But if a non-Jew wants to come up to us, sit there and say to him, listen, you're not bound by these standards right now, so what do you need them for? You are bound by the Noachide laws, but you're not bound by these standards, so why do you want to keep them for? And because we want to make sure that he will keep them, but people don't recognize it. There's a mitzvah to megayer someone who really could be a good Jew and wants to be a Jew. It's actually one of the Torah mitzvahs. Bezdin has to megayer the proper Jew. And that leads to the famous story of Timnah. Right? Timnah was a woman who wanted to be megayer, whatever that meant in the time of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay? I mean, the Midrashic language is a little bit unclear, but the fact is that she wanted to be megayer, and she wanted to megayer, and the Abbas didn't accept her. Okay? And she turned around and said, okay, if I can't be a member of that family, at least it's better to be associated. She became the Pelegish to Eliphaz. Eliphaz was the son of Esav, so she said better to have some connection with that family, even as a Pelegish, even though she was a princess, she was from royalty, and she said better to have some association with that family, even as a Pelegish to Eliphaz, than not to have any connection. So, because they say she wanted to be Megayer. So Kodesh Baruch Hu said, because you did not accept her gerus, that was really wrong. So her kid was a Malek. And Kodesh Baruch Hu said that that's the punishment for not accepting Timnah. So the point is this idea that we always turn away gerim. It's true. You want to make sure that they're going to meet the standards. You want to make sure but it's not so simple that you can just, if someone really wants to be Megayer and really is going to be a good, you perceive as really has pure intentions and is going to be a good member of Klal Yisrael, there's a chiyuv to Megayer. Yeah. On Bezdin, specifically on Bezdin,
I'm a little
right?
confused about that story about this woman. Who
Yeah.
did Reuven through Binyamin marry?
Yeah, that's a big problem.
I mean, they didn't go back to...
Well, Timnah obviously was older because she married Eliphaz. Eliphaz was...
But I'm just saying...
Okay, so you're right. It was about the same...
Abraham's family for
Okay,
the
you're
first
right.
couple of generations.
Okay.
When we got to the third generation...
Yeah, I mean, the fact is there's a lot of issues of who they married. There's Midrashim that they were always born with sisters.
That makes it worse.
Well, that's another thing. The fact is that if you look in the Arayas, where it talks about the prohibitions of marrying sisters, it specifically says chesed hi. It's a classic line in the Arayas. It's a chesed hi. Now, what does it mean? Don't do this because it's a chesed, right? You shouldn't practice interest because it's a chesed. What does that mean? First of all, if it's a chesed, why aren't you practicing it? So, but what does it mean? It's not a chesed. So there's a lot of different approaches to it. One answer is that it's specifically said by sisters that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did a chesed to the world, and when it was necessary, allowed brothers to marry sisters. For example, were all the children what?
Din and Shimon?
Well, that's another issue. That Shimon did marry Dinah, who was his sister. There's other issues that Rabbi. But the truth is, we're all children. Right, they all married sisters. There's no one else. So the fact is that there's that argument, so forth and so forth. That's okay.
Specifically, it says Yehoshua married Yehuda married Bat-Shua, right? Like
I have to look at my dressing room over there who that was. Okay.
So you have to go back.
Well, the fact is, he did marry. Okay, I mean, he married.
Women and brought them into
well, the fact is that seems to be. It seems to be. I mean. You're getting into an interesting issue because the fact is Yehuda married Bat-Shua, but Yehuda also married Tamar. Tamar was supposed. The Medrashim say Tamar was the daughter of Shem, right? Nice from family, right? He was a Rosh Hashiva, right? He was a they say Shem is Malchi Tzedek, the Kohen the Kel Elyon. So the truth of the matter is that seems to be a good shidduch. So if Shem and Aver and Malchi Tzedek is living in Yerushalayim, right, in Melech Shalem, he's in Yerushalayim, right? So how come Avram doesn't go to Shem and say, hey, listen, can I get a kid for? Can Yitzchak marry one of your daughters or whatever? I mean, there's a lot of issues there. But the point is that it does seem that you're right. I mean, Yehuda did marry it seems to be a Canaanite. Right, but sure seems to come again, and it seems to be some. There's a lot of it. Why did Avram feel he had to send to get Yitzchak? Why did he have to send Eliezer to get a shidduch for Yitzchak from the family? Why did Yaakov have to go back to Lavan to get? I mean, these are all issues when eventually with the 12 brothers. But there are shittas hold the 12 brothers married sisters. The classic example is not even the born sisters. Is Dinah. Shimon basically ended up marrying Dinah.
But that's also midrash, right?
Yeah. But the fact is that again, midrash. You know, you're going to say I mean, because there's a lot of contradictions in midrashim, right? There's always constant contradictions in midrashim. Okay, so the point is that
how do you know what you know?
How do you know which is right between? How do you know what the truth? I mean, the fact is that a midrash. To work out history from the Medrash, that's not really the point of the Medrash. Okay, I'm not saying Midrashim that there aren't Midrashim that are to be understood literally, and there are Midrashim that basically allegorical. There's a Midrashim that contradict each other, you know, A or B, so they can't both be right historically. But there's obviously a concept that comes out of it, and conceptually, it's obviously telling you something. That has some application.
Well, other than that, I understand it may tell you something and so forth, but how do you know that it's not an interesting story as opposed to quote unquote the truth?
But does it need to be the truth, or is it just
right? I don't know. The fact is, what do we mean by truth? It's presenting a truthful idea.
The factual.
Okay, the facts are as important as the concept that's being presented. I'll tell you the truth. The truth is that even in the terms of understanding the facts, if you just go through the Chumash, okay, I don't think we could really understand the facts. I mean, I point this out. I mean, the point is that people get all caught up in the facts and so forth. Do you understand Sarah going to her husband and saying, "Hey, I don't have any kids. Why don't you take my maidservant, sleep with her, and have a child with her?" Okay?
That's not as hard to understand in that kind of society.
You can understand a woman doing that?
It's a different time.
Yeah.
It's a different time. But the fact is, it's a different consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we really don't understand that consciousness. Okay? I mean, you talk about Tamar. Tamar is so adamant that she has to do Yibum that she basically dresses up as a prostitute in order to try and seduce Yehuda, and Yehuda goes to a prostitute. Okay, the fact is, and most people say Yehuda didn't have Bechira, that's what happened. Rambam says no, prostitution was okay back then. Okay, under Shem Mitzvah B'nai there's no problem with prostitution. So it's a Rambam sheet. I mean, the fact is that you're talking about concepts, but even if you want to talk about the facts, you're talking about facts that in a world that you can't comprehend. I'm not just talking about physical world. I'm not just talking, everyone's. I mean, the story with Avram and Sarah. Avram's 90 and Avram's 100, Sarah's 90, and it's like unbelievable. They're having a kid. And Sarah says, "What? My husband's is 100 years old. He's going to have a kid, and it's unbelievable." And she's always shocked by this, and so forth and so forth. Unbelievable. Okay. And Avram, how many years later? About 40 years later. You see, yeah, about 40 years later. 6 more kids. No one's shocked by that. And it's with Keturah, who might be Hagar, right? So Hagar's been around for a while. She has 6 more kids. Right, and everyone's shocked about Sarah having a kid, and Sarah's shocked. Well, my husband's going to have a kid with me. I mean, it's like you're talking about a world. I mean, and everyone lives to 137. You're talking about a world we can't even comprehend. So if you try to figure out the facts, that's not really what it's about. It's trying to understand truthful concepts. That doesn't mean I'm denying the facts. That doesn't mean it's all allegorical. I'm not saying it's allegorical. I'm just saying that there's some facts going on there, but it's very hard for us to really even comprehend them. Okay, so the only thing I can comprehend, hopefully, is some ideas that it's trying to express to me. Okay, and that I think is a guiding light throughout the Chumash. I think it's important to have that perspective throughout the Chumash. That if you're reading it as a history book, it's almost incomprehensible. Beside not knowing the history, beside the contradictions, beside the fact we don't really know what's going on over here. I mean, in last week's parsha, you're reading about having magic, right? The Chartumim had magic. What kind of world had magic?
Maybe it was a sleight of hand.
Maybe it was. So with sleight of hand, they were able to turn water into blood, and then bring forth, and then they also do frogs. What? Yeah, and able to turn a staff into a snake. It's a nice sleight of hand. Gee, I'd like to know how they did that.
Meaning it's something visual that maybe it was always...
Okay, but it seems to me that a lot... Okay, the Rambam most likely would take your viewpoint. Other people said they seem to have some real power of magic. I mean, there's a consciousness there I don't understand. Even in terms of idolatry. You talk in terms of idolatry. I tell this case many, many times to people. Okay? The case of Achav and Eliyahu and Izebel, right? Eliyahu does the thing on Har Carmel, right? Okay. This would be wipes the floor with the Nevi'ah Habal, right? Basically does a thing, right? Says, okay, you guys, you go first. You know, try and get down some fire from heaven to light your fire and see what happens. And you got the whole morning. Keep going. No. You guys, you take your time, but as long as you need to try and get this happening.
Wake him up.
Wake him up. Do whatever you want. Okay. You finished? What does Eliyahu do? Take some water. Imagine this. He says, "Are you finished now?" Okay. Completely drenches the thing, and it says, "Okay, God, light the fire." And poof, there's a fire. So everyone who sees that says Hashem Hu Elokim. That's where we get it from Yom Kippur, right? Hashem Hu Elokim. Achav sees it, says Hashem Hu Elokim. No doubt about it. Eliyahu goes out and wipes out the Nevi'ah Abal. He basically goes out and just wipes them out, right? Now, what happens? Achav goes home and tells Izebel, right? Hey, this is what I saw today, right? What does Izebel do? She calls over a messenger, writes a note. Writes a letter to say, take this to Eliyahu. What does the message say? Listen, 24 hours from now, you're going to be in the same place that my priests are. In other words, after hearing this whole story, Yisrael basically says, I'm going to make sure you're dead in 24 hours for doing this to my priests. You're looking at this and saying, what? Where is she? What kind of woman? This is crazy. Well, I mean, you're not scared at all? Right? She sends a message over to Eliyahu. What does Eliyahu do?
Hi.
Yeah, he heads off to Yehuda. He wants to get away from Izebel. You're looking at I mean, do you understand what's going on in this story? The mind. I mean, what I'm just pointing out is that if you think about this, trying to understand this story, right, with our mind consciousness, I'm not even going to attempt it. I will try and take out ideas. I will try and take out I will try and mine it for the facts that I can understand, given my frame of reference in my time and place. But for me to actually state historically this is what occurred in terms of knowing what happened in terms of the mechanics of history, I have no idea, because I'm talking about a world I can't even comprehend. You follow what I'm saying? So that to me is a that to me, we got really sidetracked over here, but that to me is significant. Anyways, where were we? Okay, so back to freedom of religion. Just see what time it is here for a sec. Okay, we'll take a couple more minutes. We're already past time, but I think we started late. So just going back to freedom of religion. The fact is when I raised the question, you already really, without stating it, already reflected the originating problem. Okay? We raised the issue of proselytizing. We don't like proselytizing. We raised the issue of reaching out non-Jews. But the fact of the matter is, in our consciousness, we think there is a value in freedom of religion. Right? We think freedom of religion is a good thing. We think it's a value. If a person doesn't practice freedom of religion, we would not think that person is a good person. Right? Yeah.
You mean freedom of religion between Jew and non-Jew, or freedom of religion within the Jewish?
Well, I'm talking about generally the concept of freedom of religion. In other words, I'm talking as a North American right now. The point is
about a Haredi in certain parts of.
Yes, I understand it, but I'm talking about when I raised the question. My original question was: does the Torah believe in freedom of religion? Is that a Torah value? And we got off and said, well, it doesn't seem to be based upon Tanakh. Then we got into issues. Well, maybe there's only Jews were tough on. Maybe they were more tolerant of non-Jews practicing idolatry, but even that could be challenged. There's the 7 Noahide laws. But the fact is, as we talk about it, the point is that in our consciousness, I'm talking in our minds, when you talk about values, okay, is there a value to not killing? Yes. Is there a value in not stealing? Yes. Is there a value in freedom of religion?
But
and
do you mean, like, do you believe that you should live in a society that has a government that believes in freedom of religion? Or when you say he should practice freedom of religion, what is
okay, in a government, okay, let's take a government, right?
Well,
let's
take it's a pragmatic
okay,
thing.
you're right. Well, exactly. It's pragmatic for us to want it, right? I'm totally agreeing. For us, it's worthwhile. We're happy they believe in freedom of religion. Okay, I'm asking, but you see, there's an interesting perception. Is our attitude freedom of religion and pushing it in North America basically because it's pragmatic? In other words, if I was going to set up a state, I would never allow freedom of religion, right? If I was setting up a country, Al Pi Torah, no way would I practice freedom of religion. I'd impose my religion. But if I'm in another place, right, I don't want them to impose upon me. So it's like, hey, if I'm in charge, I'll impose my values upon you. But if you're in charge, I want you to practice freedom and not impose those values upon me. Is that our attitude to freedom of religion? Yeah.
I don't think that we can expect to force something when it comes to religion, but we can have a hope, like at the end of Aleinu, Bayom Hahu, Yashem Echad. That's a concept. That's an ideal concept. We hope. We're not saying that, in the ideal world everyone's going to be believing in whatever. We're saying in the ideal world everyone's going to be believing in God.
If you wanted to set up a Torah country, right? Would you let the Muslims build their mosques and the Christians build their churches and the Baha'i build their faith places and Hindus having their temples? Right? Freedom of religion. Right? Would that be, if you were setting up because the Torah believes in a value of freedom of religion, or, which is what America does. America says, listen, you practice your own faith, and we'll let you build your church. Not only that, I just wrote a letter for someone. He's taking the SATs, and he says, listen, it's my faith. I can't take the SATs on SATs on Saturdays, so please allow them to write on Sundays. So we accommodate them. It's unbelievable, right? Hey, listen, sure, we want you to keep your religion. I'm not, when I was in university, I had an exam on Saturday. I went to my prof, had an exam on Saturday. He said, no, that's not good. I understand you can't take it. So I became really popular with all my classmates. Prof changed it to Saturday night. Rather than giving me an exam, no, I'm not going to write your own exam. We'll have the exam now Saturday night. That's okay with you, right? Every one of my classmates were like, thanks. This is what I need to do on a Saturday night. Okay. Anyways, but the point is that it's wonderful. This guy loved it. Of course you got to keep your religion. It's tremendous. It's wonderful. It's great. Okay? Do you feel the same way? Person comes up to you and says, hey, I have to do. Oh no, it's great. You're going to keep your religion. Yeah. Go down to your little Hindu, idols. Yeah. The point is that how do you understand that? The fact is that we think there's a value in the freedoms. Let's extend it beyond freedom of religion. We believe, especially Americans, in the values of the freedoms. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right? All the freedoms, right? They are values to us, right? I mean, the fact is we feel that there are values, right? We hear of a country that doesn't practice freedom of religion. Ooh, evil. Now the point is, turn that around. If you were in charge, would you practice those values? Or would you sit there and say, no, if I was in charge, I would never give freedom for someone to say something that I disagreed with? That's where you get into issues, because really what you have is a crunching of values here. It's right in the consciousness of we Jews in North America. Okay, unless you live in a very, very removed world, which basically doesn't incorporate any teachings of American values, but it seems to me we get it. But there it even becomes more problematic, because people still use them and use them pragmatically. So let me tell you, there was a case in Skokie a while back where the Nazis wanted to march down Skokie. And it was a whole big thing, because Skokie is a Jewish neighborhood, and it was obviously, to specifically, upset the Jews, lahachas. So there was a whole big case about it, and so forth and so forth. So they had I saw this press, this sort of, what do you call it? A time where the press had a chance to, the head Nazi was there, and his lawyer there, from the ACLU, a nice Jewish boy.
Press conference.
Right, press conference. Right, ask questions and so forth and so forth. And the ACLU guy saying, freedom, the freedom of speech and so forth and so forth, and they're not causing any harm to. And the argument against is, but they're being lahafas. They're actually doing it to provoke violence. Okay, but so one of the press guys asked the Nazi, says, here you are arguing freedom of speech, but you guys don't believe in freedom of speech. If you were a Nazi country, you wouldn't have freedom of speech. So how can you argue this? So the Nazi says, yeah, if I was in charge, I would never believe in freedom. I would never give over freedom of speech, right? But if you're stupid enough to have this value of freedom of speech, why shouldn't I take advantage of it? Right? Now, is that our attitude? If we're in charge, we would clearly not have freedom of religion and freedom of speech, whatever. But if we're in this country, thank God and you're going to let us do it, that's great. We're going to take advantage of it. Is that the attitude? I don't think it is. And I'll tell you why I don't think it is. Because Ramosha refers to America as a Medina Shel Chesed. I don't think Ramosha just basically said, oh, good, they're giving us freedom of religion. No, I don't believe in that. That's a stupid value. But if they want to follow you, let them follow. But me, I would never let them do it. I don't think that's the way Ramosha thought. I think Ramosha said, in America, someone asked him a question about doing something with taxes. And Ramosha basically said, well, why would you not want to pay your taxes here? It's a very interesting attitude, especially when you talk about Dina Mechuzadina and then taxes and stuff like that, because in Europe there was always concerns for taxation. Always concerned of whether it was fair or not. And if it wasn't fair, then you didn't have to be such a good citizen, because they're not fair to you. You have to be fair to them. But someone asked Ramosha about this, and Ramosha says, "What are you talking about? This is Medina Shel Chesed. course you want to pay your taxes. They're doing so good to us. So do you think Moshe was thinking, Chas v'shalom, like thinking like that Nazi, hey, you're just stupid enough to give us this law, that's great, but I don't believe it? No, there's obviously something in his tone that saw that this was a good value. So if it is a good value, so how does Torah understand it? And have this how do we look at this whole concept of religion, of knowledge, and so forth and so forth? That's the underlying question here. And by the way, it's very interesting. Rabbi Broid, I once spoke in Atlanta at Rabbi Broid's shul, and I had the pleasure of spending Shabbos with him. We had some very interesting questions, interesting conversations to say. And one of the things he pointed out to me, because Rabbi Broid is a remarkable baki, Michael Broid, remarkable baki. So he told me that of the 5 major poskim in America, Rav Moshe, he considered the Rav, he's Rav Henkin, the Satmar Rav, and the 5th one I don't remember who it was. But he said the 5 major poskim in America, you can almost tell to the year that they figured out that America was not Europe. Because up until this point in time, their attitude towards the government was one way, the same way as to Europe. They're not friendly to Jews. You have to be on your you have to be on your toes with dealing with them. All of a sudden, he says, in some point in time, you see a complete change in their attitude towards America. That, wait a second, these people are a little bit different. And therefore, we have to recognize that we're dealing with people that actually are people who are honest, we can relate to. And as Rav Moshe says, Medina shel chesed. So the point is that that's just, well, if they're stupid enough to have this concept of religion, we can be pragmatic. Or is there a value there? Then how do we understand that value and as in terms of incorporating in Torah? That's really the question, and the repercussions of this into any other things. That's really what it comes down to, and it also affects our how we relate to people of other religions. Okay, even if it's not to idolatry, how do you relate to Christians? How do you relate to Muslims? So forth, and yeah.
Is it possible that maybe a different sort of pragmatism? Maybe they're able to be so expansive because they're not really afraid of losing numbers. There's plenty of Christians in the world. I mean, the societies that are free and allow it are primarily Christian, right? Societies, and they don't need to feel nervous about losing numbers.
The fact is you see, the truth is freedom of religion is defined many different ways. There's a question of freedom of religion and freedom from religion. You now see some of this tension in Europe with the influx of Muslims and the idea of the difference between religion and culture, where they're arguing. Listen, and you see this also in certain ways where a lot of Christians will tell you they don't really believe in Christianity, but they'll still celebrate Christmas. A lot of people out there says, I don't really believe this stuff, but I want to have Christmas because that's already part of their culture. So the point is that then you get concerned about how will freedom of religion change culture and so forth and so forth. But there is to be, it's becoming more complicated in Europe in terms of how to maintain freedom of religion in Europe now, where there's a concern of effect on culture. But the fact is, deep down, I think that most, especially in America, in a certain way, it's like, and you see this in Canada as well, it's almost like they like the different religions because it's a mosaic. Like, it's like, wow, I can go to the Thai restaurant, and I go to the Chinese restaurant, and I can go to the Polish restaurant. It's wonderful. Nowadays with intermarriage, it's like, wow, look how much culture you're giving to your children, right? If you have an intermarried grandparents, send out to intermarried. Beforehand, we only had to celebrate Christmas. Now, because of this grandparent, we celebrate Christmas. This grandparent, we celebrate Greek Orthodox Christmas. This grandparent, we celebrate Hanukkah. And this grandparent, we now do Kwanzaa. It's unbelievable how we've enriched ourselves and so forth. There's a lot of different manifestations of this concept, how it's going to play out and so forth. And that's really in terms of cultural connections. But you see that cultural issues also in terms of the Jewish community, because there are people in the Jewish community who are very reluctant to marry Sephardim marrying Ashkenazim, Ashkenazim. I mean, a little bit more openness now, but there are a lot of people, even from what I hear, even like Polish, what do you mean I'm going to marry a Hungarian? Because there was perception of cultural distinctions, even within religion. But you're getting into complicated issues. But the fact is that the bottom line issue is how do we relate to this concept of freedom of religion, that basically says, I'm letting you practice your religion. Do we let the other person practice religion, including religions that might be idolatry? And then, and by the way, there's an interesting pragmatic question in halacha because of this. The question came up: how should Jewish organizations, Torah organizations, what should be their stance in terms of abortion in the states? So, what do you think is a goodest position? What do you think the Torah position on abortion is in the states? Pro-choice or pro-life?
Does it have to fall within one camp?
Well, in terms of voting, what do you is it more pro? What?
I'm thinking choice.
What?
I'm thinking choice.
Okay. The fact is, most people think it's pro-life, but it's actually pro-choice. The reason for it is like this. The question was actually asked to Ramosha, and Ramosha said it's important to go pro-choice because pro-life, there are certain advocates of pro-life that
allow the woman to die rather than.
Well, no, pro-life, who or basically are against what's called partial birth abortions, which basically means that at some point in time, the woman's already in labor at some point in time. Before the head of the baby comes out, or other shitas before most of the baby comes out, the Mishnah says it's a chiyuv to kill the fetus to save the mother, even if she's in labor, even if it's until the head comes out. Once the head comes out, some people say most of the body has come out, but the fact is that you have an obligation to kill the fetus. There's no choice there. You must kill the fetus.
In order to save a woman.
So save the mother. So save the mother. That's that situation. The point is,
and the pro-life will say,
and there are certain people in pro-life that would say you can't kill the baby at that point in time.
Rather let the mother die.
Right, or let it be whatever happens. At that point in time, I mean, the Catholic position for many years was to save the child versus the mother because the child needs baptism and the mother is already baptized. So the fact is that was a classic Catholic position. I don't know if it's the same way anymore. But the point is, as Ramosha said, because there's a possibility of a situation that would force, if the law was such a way, it would put problems on halachic observance. So the answer to approach is it should be pro-choice. The person should make their decision in concert with the religious authority. Okay, so that's an interesting question. It's another even more radical question that came up, I heard recently. There was a pagan group in Baltimore, Maryland, who wanted to do animal sacrifices. And it was in violation of some animal rights laws. And they argued freedom of religion. And it was a big court case down there. And from my understanding is every Orthodox Jewish organization intervened on the side of the pagans for freedom of religion. It created, you were talking about strange bedfellows. Here you are supporting pagans doing their idolatry, right, in order to maintain freedom of religion. So the truth is, this just shows how complex the issue is. But the fact is that do we think there's any value in freedom of religion from a Torah perspective? And that's a unique question that comes up because we live under under freedom of religion. I guess I'll have to take it up from here next week.